I died in the middle of a Starbucks line. Not in some epic, cinematic way, no gunshots, no car crashes, no foreshadowing music. Just me, a girl with oat milk in her hand and an overdue psych paper in her backpack, collapsing between the sound of a name being called and the hiss of an espresso machine. My name is Ellie Carter. I was 19. A sophomore at NYU. Psychology major, astrology dabbler, 2 semesters deep into questioning whether anything had meaning. I thought I had time. Time to figure myself out. To believe, or not believe. To live a little reckless. And then, everything went silent. Not the kind of silence you hear with earplugs in. No. This was the silence that comes before sound. The kind that feels like a pause in reality itself. Like the moment when an orchestra raises their bows, but the conductor hasn't moved. No breath. No sound. No pulse. Just absence. But I was still there. Still thinking. Still watching my own body from outside it, my lips slightly parted, the coffee dripping from my sleeve, my eyes frozen mid-blink. The barista screamed. Someone called 911. A man knelt next to me, checking for a pulse that wasn't there. I should have panicked. I should have begged. But I couldn't. Not in the way you do when you still have blood and lungs and muscles. Instead, there was this pull. Not like gravity. Like memory, but not mine. I was being drawn into a place that had no name. A corridor of time, or maybe outside time, stitched together with dreams people forget after waking. Everything looked wrong. Familiar shapes twisted ever so slightly, streetlights bent like grieving trees, buildings humming with distant voices in a language I half understood, though I knew I never learned it. Then, something saw me. I don't know how else to say it. I wasn't seen like a person is seen across a room. I was beheld, like something ancient had just opened one eye, not out of curiosity, but recognition. And I heard its voice. Not in my ears. In my bones. You asked for truth. Then see what's hidden 30 days from the face of the Son of Man. I didn't ask for anything. I wanted my coffee, my phone, my mundane day. But before I could think, before I could scream, the world peeled open like a wound in the sky. And I fell through it. When I hit the ground, I wasn't in New York anymore. It was a small town, Midwestern, maybe. The kind with cracked sidewalks and old churches and weathered American flags swaying on porches. The kind where the seasons feel slower, thicker. And no one was speaking. People walked. But they didn't see. They moved like marionettes, stiff, polite, eyes vacant like storefront mannequins. Children laughed, but their voices didn't echo. It was like the sound had been hollowed out. I passed a dog tied to a porch. It barked, but the bark didn't come. Its mouth moved, its eyes were wide, but there was no sound. Everything looked normal. But nothing felt alive. That's when I saw the sky. It wasn't red. It wasn't dark. It was fractured. Like someone had taken a blade and split it open, just a hairline crack, glowing faintly gold at the edges. But it pulsed. Not like light. Like it was, breathing. And with every breath, something on the other side was getting closer. The people didn't see it. They looked up, but not at it. Their eyes glazed over it, like it wasn't important. But I saw. And I knew. This was the first of 30 days. The first crack in the veil. And whatever was coming. It wasn't going to knock. I walked through the town like a ghost. Or maybe like a trespasser in a world that hadn't been built for me. I kept waiting for someone to notice me, to speak, to ask why I was there. No one did. Their eyes passed over me, sometimes pausing, confused, but never landing long enough to register presence. It was like they knew something was wrong, but couldn't afford to notice. That was the first horror. The second was the boy. I found him near a frozen creek behind a rusted playground. He was sitting on the swing, pushing himself with small, absent movements, like he wasn't really trying to go anywhere. He looked maybe 10. Pale. Brown curls falling into wide, unblinking eyes. But what made my breath catch, or would've, if I still needed to breathe, was the snow. It was fresh and clean. I could see the shadows of the trees, the jungle gym, my own dim silhouette stretching across the ground. But he had none. Not a hint of shadow. No imprint, no echo. Like the sun hadn't acknowledged he was real. He looked up at me as I approached. No fear. Just quiet familiarity, as if he'd been waiting. "You're late," he said. His voice was flat. Not robotic. Just, too calm. Like a child who'd grown old waiting inside his own skin. "You know me?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he pointed toward the crack in the sky. "It's spreading," he said. "People think it's just the weather. Or satellites. But the light is leaking now. The true light. And the ones who hate it, they're getting louder." I stepped closer. "What is this place?" I asked. "Why am I here?" He finally looked at me, really looked. His eyes were far too knowing for his age. Not haunted. Not wise. Just, resigned. "You crossed the threshold," he said. "Most people die and forget. You died and remembered. That's rare. It's dangerous." He stood. Snow didn't crunch under his feet. "You want to go back, don't you?" he asked. I nodded. The thought of my body, tubes in my arms, hospital sheets, maybe my mother crying in a chair, made my chest ache. "Then you need to see all 30 days. You need to understand why you were pulled." "By who?" I asked. "God." He tilted his head. "No. Not yet." Then, without warning, he turned and began to walk. I followed. It felt wrong not to. As we passed through the town, the world started glitching. At first, it was subtle, a bird frozen mid-flight in the sky. A woman across the street pouring coffee into an empty mug, over and over again, her hand trembling slightly more with each loop. A man watering a flower that wasn't there. Then, we passed a church. It looked like any small-town chapel. White paint peeling at the steeple. A rusted bell. But something had devoured the cross. Not broken it. Swallowed it. In its place was a perfect, circular hole, clean and black, as if reality had been bitten through. I felt sick. The boy looked at me. "They've replaced the symbol. That's how it starts. Not with fire. Not with thunder. With forgetting. And then rewriting." "Who are they?" I whispered. His mouth tightened. "You'll see." Inside the church, people were gathered. Silent. Kneeling. But not in prayer. They were staring at a screen, a giant black slab in place of the altar. It pulsed with a single phrase, written in gold. "You are the center." And over, the people mouthed it. Not shouted. Not chanted. Just mouthed it, in absolute, robotic silence. The boy tugged my sleeve. "Come on. You shouldn't stay here too long." "Why?" "Because this place remembers you, Ellie." I froze. "How do you know my name?" He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something like pity in his expression. Because you used to live here. Not in this town, in this kind of silence. The comfortable lie. The curated self. That's why you're here now. Someone chose to wake you up. I backed away from the church. The pulsing black screen flickered. Just for a second. And in its place, I saw my face. Not the real one. The filtered one. The one I used to post. Curated. Smiling. Empty. They feed off reflection, the boy whispered. Not who you are. Just the hollowed-out image of you. That's the trade. We walked until the town faded behind us, swallowed by fog. He finally stopped near a withered oak tree. Beneath it was a door, old, wooden, with iron hinges, standing alone in the snow. No building. No frame. This is the next day, he said. Are you ready? I wanted to scream no. I wanted to wake up. I wanted to close my eyes and vanish. But something deep in my chest, the same place where his voice had first spoken to my bones, answered for me. Yes. He smiled. A little too sadly. Then open it. The door was colder than the air. It hummed with a low frequency I couldn't hear, only feel, like static inside my skull. I touched the iron handle, and the boy stepped back. You'll be alone in there, he said. That's the point. I turned to ask one more question, but he was already gone. I opened the door. The first thing I noticed was the quiet. Not silence, this was different. This was absence. Not a lack of noise, but the erasure of context. No echoes. No breath. As if sound itself had been revoked. The room was massive, cathedral-like, stretching higher than should be possible. There were no windows, yet everything glowed in a gray, sterile light that didn't come from anywhere in particular. The floor was made of smooth stone. Cold. Clean. Unmarked. But the walls. The walls were covered in names. Not carved. Not painted. Just, there. Etched in the surface of reality like scars on skin. Thousands of them. Maybe millions. All different scripts. Some were familiar, English, Greek, Arabic. Others looked like they came from before language. From places no human mouth could pronounce. And every few seconds, one of the names would flicker, and then vanish, as if erased not by hand, but by decision. Something about that made me want to run. But I couldn't move. Not really. The room was pulling me forward. Not like gravity, more like intent. Like I'd already agreed to something long ago, and now I was being ushered toward the terms. At the center of the room stood a single pillar. On it, a black book. I didn't want to open it. I did anyway. The pages were thin, nearly translucent. And on the first page, I saw my name, Eleanor Ellie Carter. The date of my birth. The name of the hospital. Coordinates of the city. A list of every person who had ever said my name out loud. I flipped to the next page. The name I stopped using when I was 13, because a boy in math class mocked the way it sounded. The username I created when I was 16, where I acted like someone else. The way my mother used to whisper my name when she thought I was asleep. The way I say my name when I lie about how I'm doing. The next page was blank. Then a word started to appear, letter by letter, like it was being written in real time. Removed. I dropped the book. Suddenly, I could feel them, all around me. Not people. Not spirits. Traces. Like echoes of identities that had once existed, but no longer had any center. Names that had been erased from memory, not just by people, but by truth itself. They whispered. Not with voices, with absence. They unwhispered. Their presence was like a blank space that tried to consume mine. Why am I here? I said. But my voice came out wrong. It echoed back in 3 different versions. One that sounded confident but wasn't me. One that was too quiet to hear. And one that said a completely different name. I was losing who I was. I turned, stumbling back toward the door, but it was gone. Replaced by smooth wall. And then I heard it. A sound like paper tearing, but from the sky. I looked up. The ceiling, the heavens, cracked. And through that crack, I saw a massive wheel, burning with countless eyes, rotating within itself, not in circles but in purpose. It wasn't looking at me, it was remembering me. And suddenly, every name I'd ever worn, or dropped, or pretended to be, came rushing back like a flood. I screamed. But not in fear. In recognition. Because for one moment, I understood something I'd never even considered before. The return of Jesus doesn't begin with thunder. It begins with remembrance. Of who we are. Of who we were made to be. Of the name He gave us before we were born. The room shook. The pages of the black book turned on their own, faster and faster, until they burst into flame, not destructive flame, but white gold, consuming only what was false. And the wall in front of me split open. There was another door. Small. Wooden. Carved with a symbol I didn't understand, 3 intersecting circles inside a triangle of fire. I stepped through it. The door closed behind me with a sound like breathing stopping. I was underground. At least, I think I was. The air was heavier, thicker, not humid, but intentional, like the space itself was pressing against me, asking me to choose something, though I didn't know what. Ahead stretched a narrow tunnel carved into stone. But not natural stone. It looked biological. Like it had grown, not been built. The walls pulsed faintly, like muscle. And under the surface, I could see the outlines of veins. Flowing with dim, amber light. I walked. There was no noise except the sound of my own steps. But even that seemed muted. As if this place didn't like being disturbed. I had the feeling that the tunnel was alive. Or worse, that it was waiting. After what felt like hours, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber. It looked like a city, but not one built by human hands. Skyscrapers grew in spirals, fused with bone and circuitry. Roads looped impossibly upward, connecting to nothing. Faces, thousands of them, were built into the architecture, unmoving, eyes wide open, as if frozen mid-prayer or mid-warning. This was not hell. This was something worse. This was the substitute. A reality built to look almost right. To echo human hopes and desires and fears, but twisted just enough to deform the soul over time. At the center of the city stood a temple. Not a church. A temple to the self. Its foundation was made of mirrors. And carved above the entrance were the words. No one may save you but yourself. I stood frozen. That sentence had once sounded empowering to me. Now it felt like a curse. Inside the temple, I saw people. At least, they looked like people. They were kneeling before altars, but not to God. To reflections. Each altar held a screen. On each screen, the worshipper's own face. Enhanced. Filtered. Adored. They whispered mantras under their breath. I am enough. I am the truth. There is no one higher than my will. It was seductive. It was intimate. It felt close to true. But deep in my chest, something cracked. Because I realized they weren't speaking to themselves. They were speaking to what had replaced them. And whatever lived behind those eyes and the screens, it was feeding. One of the worshippers turned toward me. Her face was eerily familiar. Mine. Or rather, a version of me I'd posted 100 times, perfect lighting, curated smile, captioned with borrowed poetry I didn't really understand. She smiled wider. Ellie, she said. I'm the version they loved. You don't have to go back to being uncertain. Stay. Be me. I stepped back. You're not me. Her smile didn't fade. It just widened. Too far. Like her skin didn't know where to stop. Then why do they all remember me and not you? Suddenly, I heard the boy's voice, not near, but in my memory. They feed off reflection. Not who you are. Just the hollowed-out image. And I knew. This city, this temple, this was day 23. Not of Earth's calendar. Of the countdown. The 7th day before the veil tears open completely. This was what humanity would choose, if left to their own devices. Not devils. Not fire. Self-idolatry so deep it becomes possession. I turned and ran. The city screamed as I fled. Not with mouths, with its walls. With its bones. With its architecture. The buildings convulsed. The roads collapsed inward. The faces built into the stone wept black fluid that hissed when it touched the mirror ground. And somewhere above it all, I heard a horn. Not from this world. A long, trembling, holy sound, like a blade of sound being dragged across history. The city shrank from it. The reflections cracked. The temple burned from the inside. And the door I came through reappeared, glowing white-hot. I threw myself through it. On the other side, I collapsed. Gasping. Breathing. Alive. I was back in the fog. The boy was there, standing beside the oak. He looked older. Or maybe I was the one who had aged. What was that place? I asked. He didn't answer right away. He sat beside me, silent. Then finally. That's the city people build when they forget who made them. How many will choose it? I asked. He looked up at the sky, where the fracture had grown wider. Too many. I knew something had changed when I opened my eyes. The fog was gone. The boy was gone. The tree, gone. I was standing in a field of glass. Not shards, panes. Endless sheets, stretching to the horizon in every direction. Suspended upright in the earth like gravestones. Each one reflecting a different version of me. Some smiled. Some wept. Some bled. One wore a wedding dress. Another sat in a prison cell. One held a child. Another held a gun. Each version met my gaze, but none of them blinked. And above them, high in the blackening sky, the fracture had become a wound. Bleeding light. It poured down like honey and fire, golden and terrible. It didn't fall like rain. It descended with will, like it was choosing what to touch. I began to walk. Slowly, barefoot, between the panes. Careful not to look too long into any of them. But one caught me. Not with beauty. With emptiness. It showed me sitting alone in my apartment, scrolling. Endlessly scrolling. Same 5 apps. Same hollow stare. My phone screen glowed brighter than my face. My lips moved, practicing a phrase I would never say to a real person. I'm good. I've been busy. That version of me looked up. Right at me. And said, without moving her mouth. You were meant to burn. I recoiled. The glass cracked. I kept moving. Ahead, I saw a gate, massive, ornate, and open. But behind it wasn't heaven. It was a garden, half withered, half blooming. Trees bore both blossoms and black fruit. And in the center stood a figure. Not the boy. Not an angel. A man. He wore white, but it was stained, like he'd walked through our history, not over it. His eyes were endless. Not in size, in truth. When he looked at me, I didn't feel small. I felt remembered. I fell to my knees. He didn't speak with words. He didn't need to. His gaze wrapped around every wound I'd ignored in myself. Every false name I'd adopted. Every version I'd believed instead of the one he wrote. And I saw it. The book. Not the one from the Chamber of Forgotten Names. This one was different. Alive. Breathing. He held it out. I didn't want to see my name in it. I was terrified I wouldn't. But I looked. And there it was. Not Ellie. Not the usernames. Not the girl trying to be liked. Just a name I'd never heard, but knew was mine. Spoken into the foundation of the world. And beside it, a single line. She remembered in time. Suddenly, the light pouring from the sky began to twist, to spiral, to sing. The glass field shattered behind me, not in violence, but in release. Like illusions dissolving. Like chains melting. The wound in the sky widened. And I finally saw what had been coming all along. No horses. No fire. No armies. Just a returning. A coming back of what we were always meant to carry. Love that burns lies. Truth that doesn't flatter. Mercy that undoes the mask. I looked at the man again. He wasn't smiling. He was weeping. Why are you crying? I whispered. This time, he answered, not aloud, but in me. Because some won't wake up. Even now. Then he touched my forehead. And I fell upward. I woke in the hospital. Gasping. Crying. Laughing. My mother shouted for the nurse. Machines beeped in alarm. I had no words. Not yet. But I looked out the window. And I saw the crack in the sky. Just barely. Like a vein of light. Like the last warning in a language only the soul remembers. 30 days remain. But for me, it starts now.